We're going to approach a subject today that may be a little confusing, but medicine is very slow to accept anything new. And there are suspicions that medicine may have for decades before there's enough scientific proof that some of these very hard to seek a cause in clinical symptoms that enough information gathered to make a definite. The first slide that we have here is something that's very common in populations. And so often, in a colloquial way, they say, well, there's a crud that's going around and I've got it. And sometimes it's called gastrointestinal flu, or sometimes the doctor may say you've got infectious gastroenteritis. And this may be due to bacteria, to your adverse reaction to certain foods, and to viruses. But there's said to be in the United States at least 179 million cases worldwide, and the United States has a bunch of them. But that's an awful lot of gastritis, is the common term used in medicine. And the symptoms vary greatly. And often they'll just say you've got dyspepsia, talking about the pepsin in the stomach and et cetera, that it doesn't feel good. And the symptoms can vary greatly. They can be abdominal discomfort, even pain, yes or no. They can sometimes have vomiting, yes or no. Diarrhea may be present in some and not in others. A headache and a foggy mind and not feeling like working or maybe even driving a car or getting out of bed may be present or absent. That's not uncommon to have a lot of perspiration and some fever. Yes or no. Some people don't have it. And a very common thing is just weakness and feeling unstable. And the individual frequently says, I just feel lousy. And of course, the person, depending on their constitution, may not miss any work, particularly if they work for themselves, or they miss 1 to 3 days in some people. But gastroenteritis is very common and it's very variable into these symptoms that you have. Now, the most common thing is that the doctor will say, or the person says, I've got a bug. And that just means something infectious. And they're able to prove that about 11% of the cases are due to viruses, which is a string of nucleic acids that are programmed to be an infectious agent. And it's the same nucleic acids that are in DNA in the humans that are programmed differently for the properties of life. And about 18% of the cases they can prove that are due to bacteria. And the most common one is called a Campylobacteria. And then, of course, another cause is food poisoning, which can be the improper storage and handling. And that may incorporate either bacteria, viruses, or toxins that have been introduced into it. And even parasites in food poisoning is up to 30% of those in the food because primarily of poor temperatures. We don't recognize often that one of the reasons that people are living longer and have better health is due to massive things like proper processing of water that is piped all through the city to eliminate infectious agents, the processing of sewage before it's put into creeks or rivers is very important. And one should also recognize that refrigeration and freezing units that are in nearly all kitchens now have done probably more to improve health than any type of medical or surgical or pharmaceutical activity. Now, Campylobacter is a gram-negative organism. It's a little curved structure, and it's most common in poorly processed chicken, and this frequently causes diarrhea. And it's important at this point to recall the Jewish kosher kitchen, where you don't mix different types of foods in the same utensils or surface in the kitchen, because this fosters cross-contamination between dairy products and those that are from the garden. I can point out that one of my lectures when I was director of medical education at Dallas Fort Worth Center is that one of my classmates in medical school was Dr. Ivan Danhoff, and I had him come and lecture to the young students rotating through the hospital. He had his PhD and MD and his boards in gastroenterology. So he emphasized a lot about different syndromes of the GI tract, and he was a member of the faculty at Southwestern Medical School of the University of Texas, and he received from the students a designation of the most popular and top lecturer several times. He was also on a board for reviewing drugs for the Food and Drug Administration, and I particularly remember him coming in like rather than his right on target like he usually is, he was like he was in a mental haze. That what we finally found out that day is that he had referred to him at the medical school, a 12-year-old little girl, that they had ulcerative colitis, which is ulcerations in the bowel, and spasms and pain, and oftentimes multiple diarrheas. And this little girl was having up to 20 bowel movements a day. And what he was, all the local private gastroenterologists had not been able to help her, and they were planning to have a surgical removal of her colon. But before doing that and causing that lifetime disability, they referred him to Dr. Danhoff at the medical school, who presumably knows everything. And lo and behold, what got him surprised was that the grandmother of this little girl said, give her aloe leaf gel. And sure enough, they gave it to her, and she had a reversal of all her gastroenterology problems. And that's part of what we're focusing on this lecture, that it's believed by some people that these episodes of gastroenteritis, particularly those caused by the viruses, may lead to the chronic condition of the bowel called ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. But having Dr. Danhoff tell us about how this aloe leaf gel had helped this 12-year-old, to his amazement, and that's why he was kind of in a mental haze, helped prepare me for what would happen at least a decade later when I was approached to be a consultant for a company that was going to work with aloe leaf gel and try to find out what is in that gel that can be such a benefit to the gastrointestinal tract. Now, we're talking about this as a theory of complications that are chronic, that arise from having episodes of gastroenteritis. And its theory, as I attempted to share in the introduction, medicine is very slow to actually accept some various causes and responses, or even therapies for different conditions, and nobody knows what causes inflammatory bowel disease. Now, that's a fact, but some people think that are physicians that it's the episodes of gastroenteritis that hang on and alter the function of the cells in the gastrointestinal lining. And we made a point to say that the virus is a sequence of nucleic acids that are just like the DNA that is in our chromosomes that run the assembly line in all cells and are responsible for the code of life, but it's programmed differently to be an infectious agent. But because of this being the same type of RNA, it's thought that these viruses can get integrated into the DNA that is inherited from the mother and father, and that this might alter the function of the bowel. And it's a very interesting thing that aloe vera helped this little 12-year-old girl, and that it's also a benefit, we found out, in individuals that have the infectious gastroenteritis to prevent people from around them from getting it and shortening the period. So there is some basis to this theory that somehow that has not been accepted. But as we have pointed out, in ulcerative colitis, there's a broad ulceration with bloody diarrhea, multiple stools each day, and abdominal pain, particularly if you try to eat in the peristalsis of the bowel that moves the muscles, smooth muscles in the bowel. Apparently, when it hits these ulcerated areas, it really causes sharp pain. Then there's a variant of inflammatory bowel disease called Crohn's disease, the bowel. And this is a very narrow segment, kind of like a ring of an ulcerated ring. And they will have a bloody diarrhea and multiple stools. But all you have to do is surgically remove that ulcerated ring, and oftentimes by the anastomosis of the bowel and it heals, the symptoms go away. And so the surgical management of Crohn's disease is much better than efforts to try to control ulcerative colitis. As I have tried to stress, that conventional medicine has no known cause for inflammatory bowel disease of the two types that we mentioned. And there is oftentimes difficulty not knowing whether it is a generalized ulcerative colitis or the focal ring, because the symptoms are very similar. And so you have to do a scoping of the bowel to even get a hint of what it might be. And one of the conventional medicine remedies for this is to give steroids. And this giving steroids, particularly to young people, which this condition tends to be in younger humans rather than the adults, can cause serious complications and toxicity in the patient. That's part of the side effects and toxicity of pharmaceutical drugs. One should never forget that the father of pharmacology, Paracelsus, when I should say Western pharmacology, because the Chinese and the Orient and the Asiatic Indians with Ayurvedic medicine were practicing different types of pharmaceutical type folk medicine long before Western Europe. But Paracelsus' most famous statement was, all drugs are poisons. The benefit depends on the dose. And that's why people have side effects and toxicities, because the mechanism of action of the pharmaceutical drugs is to poison the engineering and design of life to suppress symptoms. And the ideal drug is that the symptoms will come back if you quit taking the drug, whereas what we will be emphasizing with the active ingredient from the aloe leaf gel is it is used by the body to correct the cause of the symptoms. Now, the optimal nutrition that comes from modern dietary supplementation excels in preventive medicine to keep individuals from getting different types of diseases, because nutrition supports and works with the genes that control the assembly line in every cell that is present, that can be seen by electron microscopy, that this assembly line takes nutrients under the control of inflammation in the genes to make bioactive compounds in cellular synthesis, which conduct the biochemistry and the physiology of life. And this acetylated mannose, that is the active ingredient from aloe leaf gel, is one of the first things we found out, and it's published in Annual Reviews of Biochemistry 1985, that 9 molecules of the acetylated mannose, for short called Acemannan, that is synthesized in the endoplasmic reticulum, is used to make a cell-to-cell membrane domain on all cells, including those of the GI tract. And this domain is for instructions and balance and harmony between all the cells and all the organs in the S1 phase, which I call good housekeeping phase, which was identified long ago by the father of human physiology called Dr. Hans Selye. And he called this balance, that this membrane domain from the active ingredient in aloe vera, he called this balance and harmony homeostasis. And this is a very powerful thing, because as the genes are activated to try to move all the ingredients in the cell to a normal range, people feel better. And if you reach homeostasis, there are no deviations from normal. And deviations from normal for human communication are called, the profiles of this deviation are called diseases and syndromes. So the very powerful thing about homeostasis, if the cells can reach this, there is the absence of deviation from normal, and you don't have diseases and syndromes. Now, at Dallas-Fort Worth Medical Center, we had 5 patients that had become quite feeble from ulcerative colitis, and they had lost so much weight and were so debilitated that even though the gastroenterologist had recommended surgical removal of their colon, in the medical evaluation, it was believed that they could not stand the assault of the anesthesia and the surgery trauma to remove the large bowel. And they all had what was, by scoping, 4+ pancolitis. In other words, everywhere they looked inside the large bowel, they saw bloody ulcers. And unfortunately, these 5 patients were deteriorating. Well, we were very aware that this Acemannan from the aloe plant had helped the little 12-year-old girl. And plus, it's one of the big uses in its 5,000-year history of human beings using it for deviations from normal health, is applying to the skin. And the cells lining the gastrointestinal tract have some commonality with the basal layer cells of the skin. So they were given 4 capsules of this aloe Acemannan, which was estimated to be between 300 and 400 milligrams of this chelated mannose. And lo and behold, those 5 patients were out of pain in a week. And by 2 weeks, they were no longer having multiple watery, bloody bowel movements, which was a significant turn of events. And soon they were having farm stools rather than diarrhea, and no pain, particularly after eating a regular meal. By the end of the month, they were gaining weight and beginning to mobilize and having no complaints of their inflammatory bowel disease. As the chief of pathology that was doing this informal approach with these ulcerative colitis patients, working with their primary care physicians, one of the patients that the gastroenterologist had seen before we started phoned, and he was absolutely excited and amazed, because he said, I have, after a month, repeated the scoping of the bowel, and it looked healed. Fact is, if he didn't know that how bad it had been, a 4+ ulceration in all areas, he says now it looks normal. And so I particularly remember a young couple that came to my office that were she was one of the 5 patients that was deteriorating so terribly. And they were in tears of happiness because she had been so sick that they had not had relationships that are sexual for over a year because of these multiple foul, bloody stools. And they had resumed their relationship, and they were so happy. And that was a very gratifying experience. Also, unrelated to those 5 people, the word got around about their responses, and there was a foster child that no one would adopt because he had inflammatory bowel disease and was scheduled for a colectomy. Well, they started him on the capsules that we had from the research at Carrington Laboratory, and the surgery was canceled. And with normal health, he was adopted in a short period, symptom-free. So there's a lot of ramifications of wonderful things that can happen when you're able to do something to help people that have deviations from normal health and have terrible symptoms from their bowel. This concludes part 1 of this video. Please click part 2 below to continue.